What weapons would Bloodborne hunters really use? Now, there are a few things that we should consider here. First, it's the Victorian period, which is 1840 or so to about 1901. We also need to consider that guns are drastically underplayed in the game. We're not worrying about silver or garlic, and we're fighting enemies ranging from like dog size to big chunkers. That gives us a plethora of weapons to choose from because that's essentially the American Wild West era, and you'd have access to all of those. Counting from 1901 down, you'd have access to the Mauser C96, the Webley revolver, the Beaumont Adams revolver, the Colt Single Action Army, and the Colt Patterson revolver. Pretty much all revolvers. You'd have access to a lot. As far as sidearms go, you'd pretty much have to figure out if you want magazine capacity, rate of fire, or firepower. A Bloodborne hunter would pick one or two of those pistols and carry those, and I also think that they would carry a sword, specifically a saber, or other officer's sword of the time period. My pick would be the 1857 Royal Engineer Officer's Saber, which I really like because it was kind of the last sword designed for fighting hand-to-hand in the time of gunpowder, designed by people who fought hand-to-hand in the time of gunpowder. So that would be a good sword. As far as primary weapons go, I mean, again, in the Wild West, you've got access to lever guns, the Sharps rifle, which is 45-70, which packs a punch, double-barrel shotguns, you'd have access to a lot. So, sidearm, primary weapon, I think a lever-action rifle and all those sidearms would be good against human and smaller-sized targets. Anything bigger than that, like the werewolf-sized beasts, then you'd be unloading like your entire tubular magazine from a Henry rifle into them in order to drop them, which would be a lot. So I think that people would get something like the Sharps rifle, cut it down, make it double barrel, probably slap a bayonet on there, and then you've got two shots of essentially 45-70, which would bring down most things. Well, not most things, but most like werewolf-sized things from the game. Now, there are things even bigger than these werewolves, and I think that these guns would be pretty useless against them. Like, any boss, you'd have a bad day if you're trying to fight one of those with a rifle. You're not gonna quick roll out of there and hack at it with a sword and then roll out and no, you try and drop it as quickly as possible. And even a 45-70 is not going to drop one of these things. Now, explosives would be pretty good. However, you have to consider that lighters weren't really too reliable or too much of a thing back then. And while you could definitely have TNT, light a match, light the TNT, that's still occupying both of your hands while you're probably fighting somebody. And then when you light the fuse and throw the TNT, you're hoping that the monster doesn't just, leave away from that, and then the explosion does nothing to them. Which is why something like the Ketchup Grenade would be really good, which is both an incredibly ironic name because don't catch these, and it also looks like a Nerf football. But anyway, it's an impact-ignited grenade. You throw it at something, it hits something that makes the percussion cap go off, and then it explodes. So instead of lighting a fuse and waiting, you're throwing it at something and it only goes off if it hits that something. I think that that would be pretty darn effective against these larger beasts. I mean, you'd have to have a number of them fighting any individual beast, so, you better know how to make them. But anyway, even though I didn't really give a specific answer of what you would use because you've got a lot of options in the Victorian period, those are what I think a Bloodborne monster hunter would pull from when trying to fight monsters.